My husband arrived with his mistress and a designer suitcase full of my clothes. Husband, you're being replaced, accept it. My daughter whispered, Mom, I put something in his briefcase. Minutes later, everyone at the dinner table froze. I, 48 female, recently found out my husband, 51 male, of 23 years was cheating. He showed up at a family dinner with his mistress, 28 female, and told me to accept it. Right before the dinner, our daughter, 19 female, whispered that she had put something into his briefcase. Minutes later, when he opened it, the entire room fell silent. Now, my life has completely changed, and honestly, I think for the better. Here's what happened. Alan stood in the driveway, one hand on the handle of a designer suitcase, the same one he had gifted me for our 20th anniversary trip to Italy. His other hand rested protectively on the small of a blonde woman's back. She couldn't have been more than 30. Her red dress looked expensive, her heels too tall for the cracked sidewalk. I blinked at him, waiting for him to explain himself. Instead, he placed the suitcase down at my feet like it was a bag of trash and said, You're being replaced, Hannah. Accept it. Just like that. No warning, no apology, no shame. 23 years of marriage tossed aside in a sentence. Sophie, our daughter, was standing behind me on the porch. She gripped my hand so tightly that my fingers tingled. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, Sophie leaned in and whispered, Mom, I put something in his briefcase. Her voice was so soft, I wasn't even sure I heard it right. Alan didn't even flinch. He turned back to his car and opened the door for the woman, who slid into the passenger seat without even looking at me. I watched them drive off toward his mother's estate, where Sylvia Whitmore hosted dinner every year without fail. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just picked up the suitcase, stuffed carelessly with my blouses, underthings, and one of my old high school sweatshirts, and went inside to get my purse. The drive to Sylvia's was a blur. Sophie sat next to me, scrolling through her phone, calm as could be. She didn't offer more about the something she had put into Alan's briefcase, and I didn't ask. My mind was spinning too fast, anyway. When we arrived, the Whitmore estate looked just as it always did, pristine white columns, manicured lawns, lanterns glowing warmly at the entrance. You'd never know a storm was brewing inside. Alan's car was already there. So was Sabrina's. Sabrina, that was her name. I learned it when Alan introduced her to the family like it was the most natural thing in the world. This is Sabrina Monroe, my fiancée. The words hit harder than I expected. Fiancée. Not girlfriend. Not fling. He was already planning a future with her before even ending our marriage. Sylvia's face didn't even twitch. She simply nodded and ushered everyone to the dining room. The table was beautiful. Crystal glasses, polished silver, expensive floral arrangements. The kind of setting you don't want to ruin with a scene. But the tension was a living, breathing thing that sat between us all. Alan chatted as if nothing was wrong, laughing too loudly, showing off Sabrina like a new car. I barely touched my food. Sophie kept looking at me, calm and steady. Then Sylvia asked the question that cracked the evening open, Alan, where's Hannah's ring? The family heirloom. Passed down through generations. I still wore it on my left hand, though it felt like it burned my skin. Alan smiled, tapping his briefcase beside him. Safe and sound, Mother. I'll be needing it back soon. He clicked open the briefcase, expecting to pull out the velvet box. Instead, papers tumbled out, contracts, wire transfer receipts, screenshots of emails. A USB drive slid across the table and stopped in front of Sylvia. Everyone went still. Alan stared, blinking, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. He snatched up the papers, flipping through them. His face turned gray. Sophie leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass like she didn't have a care in the world. Is that everything from Dad's secret apartment? She asked sweetly. The one on King Street? Sylvia looked up sharply. The murmurs started. Alan tried to stuff the papers back into the briefcase, but Martin, his older brother, reached over and grabbed a handful. Jesus, Alan, what the heck is this? Emails between Alan and a sitting judge. Records of bribes. Proof of embezzlement from his own firm. He was done. Sabrina pushed back her chair, standing unsteadily. You didn't tell me you were under investigation, she hissed. Alan grabbed for her arm, but she jerked away. I'm not going down with you, she snapped, then stormed out of the house, red heels clacking furiously against the marble. Sylvia didn't say a word. She simply lifted the USB drive, studying it like it was a loaded firearm. Alan looked at me like he finally realized what was happening. His face was pleading, desperate. You set me up, he croaked. I didn't bother answering. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and picked up the lemon tart I had baked. The whole thing was absurd. Laughable. Charles was already on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones to a friend at the district attorney's office. Alan tried to leave, but Sylvia stood, blocking the door with nothing but her cane and a look that could cut glass. You disgrace yourself, she said quietly. And you disgrace this family. Alan slumped into his chair like a deflated balloon. When the police arrived, there wasn't even a struggle. Alan barely protested as they cuffed him and read him his rights in front of his family. The ride home was silent except for Sophie's occasional humming. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke. I found it by accident, she said. The apartment. The files. I wasn't going to tell you at first. But then I thought, why should he get away with it? I stared at her, at this young woman who had once hidden behind my skirts in grocery stores. She had saved me. She had saved herself. And I had never been prouder. The days that followed were a blur. Alan spent the weekend in jail before his firm fired him publicly. The news leaked to the local papers, prominent Charleston attorney arrested for fraud and embezzlement. His name was on every channel. I didn't watch the news. I didn't have to. The phone calls, the emails, the whispers in the bakery said enough. For the first time in my life, I was pitted. Neighbors who never had more than 2 words for me were suddenly showing up at my door with casseroles and sad eyes. They didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what to tell them. I wasn't mourning the marriage. I was mourning the years I had lost to someone who saw me as disposable. Sophie took it in stride. She seemed almost relieved. I found out later she had known about Sabrina long before I did. She just hadn't known what to do with that knowledge. I thought maybe you knew, she said quietly one evening as we sat on the porch with cups of chamomile tea. Or maybe you didn't want to know. She wasn't wrong. There were signs, weekend work trips that didn't make sense, credit card charges that didn't add up, a coldness that had crept into our home like a slow, inevitable leak. I had ignored them all. Denial is a powerful thing. The divorce moved fast. Alan didn't have the leverage to fight. His lawyer practically begged me to go easy, but I didn't. Sylvia, of all people, stood by me. She even gave a deposition about Alan's poor judgment and disgraceful behavior, her words clipped and scathing. We divided the assets, though with Alan's frozen accounts and pending charges, there wasn't much left to divide. I got the house, the cars, the bakery. I got peace. Alan got supervised visitation rights for Sophie, though she made it clear she had no interest in seeing him. The first time he called her from prison, she let it go to voicemail. He's dead to me, she said simply. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her it was complicated. Sometimes it wasn't. I threw myself into the bakery. Flour, sugar, butter, the things that made sense, the things that didn't lie or cheat or hurt you. Business boomed. Sympathy sales, at first. Then real ones. People seemed to rally around me. They came for the cookies and stayed for the scandal. They whispered and speculated and smiled too wide, but their money was real, and it kept the lights on. I started sleeping again. Eating again. Smiling, even when I thought no one was looking. For a while, life settled into a new rhythm. Then, one rainy Thursday, I got a letter. The return address was a correctional facility 2 hours away. Alan. I stared at the envelope for a long time before tearing it open. The letter was short. 5 sentences. A mess of apologies and regrets and half-truths. He missed me. He missed Sophie. He didn't know how things had gotten so bad. He wanted to explain. I tossed it into the trash without reading it twice. Some wounds didn't need reopening. But Alan wasn't finished. A week later, I noticed a black car parked across the street from the bakery. A man inside, wearing dark sunglasses, pretending to read a newspaper. It was so cliché it would have been funny if it wasn't so unsettling. He came back the next day. And the next. Sophie noticed him too. "You think it's Dad?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. I shrugged, but my stomach twisted. Alan still had friends. Connections. People who owed him favors or feared what he might reveal if he got desperate enough. I didn't want to believe he would stoop to pester. But after everything, could I really put anything past him? I tightened security at the bakery. Installed new locks at the house. Sylvia insisted on hiring a private investigator. If Alan thinks he can scare you into dropping the charges or coming back, he's dumber than I thought, she said sharply, handing me the PI's card. For once, I listened. The private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Teresa Cross, found out quickly that the man in the car was a private eye hired by one of Alan's old friends. No direct threats yet, but enough to make my skin crawl. Teresa advised me to document everything. To stay visible. To not let fear back me into a corner. "He's banking on you folding," she said. "Don't." I didn't. I walked to work with my head high. I smiled at customers. I took Sophie out to dinner in busy, well-lit places. I let Alan see that I wasn't afraid of him anymore. It was exhausting. But it worked. After a month, the car disappeared. The man never came back. And for the first time in a long time, I exhaled fully. Life kept moving. Sophie got accepted into Georgetown University. Full scholarship. She cried when she read the acceptance letter, clutching it like it might dissolve if she let go. We celebrated with cheap champagne and expensive cake, dancing in the kitchen until we were dizzy. "You're free now," I told her that night, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear like I used to when she was little. She smiled, teary but strong. "We're free, Mom." She was right. I didn't realize how much of myself I had buried over the years until I started to find pieces again. I laughed louder. Cried easier. Trusted slower. One day, while reorganizing the bakery storeroom, I found the old Louis Vuitton suitcase Alan had thrown at my feet. It was dusty, worn, a little scuffed. I almost threw it out. Almost. Instead, I kept it. A reminder that sometimes, being thrown away isn't the end of the story. Sometimes, it's just the beginning. Sophie left for college at the end of August. The house was unbearably quiet without her. I wandered through it some days, touching the backs of chairs, rearranging picture frames that didn't need rearranging. It's funny how silence can feel heavier than noise. She called often. More often than I had expected. Always chipper, always full of stories about her professors and dorm life and the coffee shop she had discovered 2 blocks from campus. I pretended not to hear the homesickness in her voice. She pretended not to hear the loneliness in mine. The bakery kept me busy. Orders doubled as the holidays approached. I baked until my arms ached and my back screamed, collapsing into bed each night covered in flour and satisfaction. I was surviving. But surviving isn't the same as living. It happened on a Tuesday. I was closing up the bakery when a man walked in, holding a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in brown paper. He looked about my age, maybe a few years older. Worn jeans, a soft gray sweater, kind eyes. He smiled, a little uncertainly. "Are you Hannah?" he asked. I nodded, cautious. He set the flowers on the counter. These are from Sylvia Whitmore. I blinked at him. Sylvia? Sent flowers? She said you wouldn't buy them for yourself. I couldn't help it. I laughed. That sounded like Sylvia. He stuck out his hand. I'm Daniel. Sylvia's nephew? Kind of. Complicated family tree. I shook his hand, feeling the roughness of calluses against my palm. A working man. A real one. He didn't linger. Just smiled, tipped an imaginary hat, and left. The flower smelled like hope. The next day, he came back. No flowers this time. Just coffee and a half smile that made something unfamiliar stir in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a fixture. Always stopping by around closing time, always finding some excuse to linger, helping me carry heavy boxes, fixing the wonky door hinge, tasting new recipes and offering thoughtful, honest feedback. He never pushed. Never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. Just showed up, solid and steady. It terrified me. One night, as we locked up together, he said, "You know, you don't have to keep looking over your shoulder." I froze, keys dangling from my hand. I'm not him, Daniel said quietly. I swallowed hard. I know. And maybe, for the first time, I actually did. But moving forward wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. Alan hadn't completely disappeared. I found out through Sylvia that he was appealing part of his conviction. Some loophole, some technicality he thought would buy him an early release. The thought of him walking free made my blood run cold. Sylvia wasn't worried. If he gets out, she said, sipping her tea with deliberate calm, he won't be coming back here. Trust me. Still, I beefed up the security system at home. Changed my phone number. Took self-defense classes with Teresa, the private investigator who had become a surprising friend. I wasn't naive anymore. I wasn't defenseless either. The appeal dragged on for months, a low, persistent hum of anxiety in the back of my mind. But life went on. Sophie thrived at Georgetown. She visited for Thanksgiving, throwing herself into my arms the second she stepped off the train. She noticed Daniel immediately. There was no hiding it. You're smiling more, she said slyly after he left one night. Like, a lot more. I rolled my eyes, but my heart warmed. He's just a friend, I said. She didn't argue. Just gave me a knowing look and changed the subject. It was easier not to think about the future. Easier to stay in the present, in the warm, safe now. Until the letter arrived. This time, it wasn't from Alan. It was from his lawyer. A formal, typed document informing me that Alan was seeking visitation rights. Not just with Sophie, but with me. He wanted family therapy sessions. Reconciliation. A chance to make amends. It was laughable. And yet, it shook me. The audacity. The sheer gall of it. I showed the letter to Daniel. He read it twice, his mouth a tight line. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. I didn't tell Sophie. She was too far away, too busy. She deserved peace. Instead, I prepared. Teresa helped me gather every document, every police report, every restraining order violation. Sylvia wrote a letter to the judge, outlining Alan's threats and pester. Even Martin and Charles, who had once defended their brother to the death, sided with me now. The morning of the hearing, I wore a simple black dress and no jewelry. No ring. I didn't speak to Alan in the hallway. I didn't look at him. When the judge asked if I wanted to participate in family therapy with Alan, I said one word, no firm. Clear. Unshakable. Alan's face twisted. I saw the moment he realized he had no power over me anymore. It was beautiful. The judge denied his motion. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I had felt in years. Outside, Daniel was waiting, leaning casually against his truck. He opened the door for me without a word. No pressure. No expectations. Just there. Present. Real. I slid into the seat, exhaled, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. The winter passed slowly after the hearing. Charleston doesn't get snow, not usually, but that year a thin dusting covered the rooftops and sidewalks. It made the city look softer, quieter. Like even the world needed a moment to breathe. I spent Christmas with Sophie, just the two of us. No huge family dinners, no forced smiles across tables where lies simmered under the surface. We ate Chinese takeout on the living room floor, watched old movies, and laughed until we cried. It was the happiest Christmas I'd had in years. Daniel was around more often. Never pushing. Just there. Steady as sunrise. He helped me repaint the bakery in January. Pale yellow walls, fresh white trim. A new beginning. Customers commented on how bright and cheerful it looked. "You look different too," one of my regulars said one morning, handing over exact change for a scone. Lighter. Maybe I was. But life doesn't let you drift too far into comfort without reminding you of the past. It was late February when I got the call. Teresa's voice was brisk, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Alan's out," she said. "Early release. Technicality on one of the charges." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "How?" I whispered. "Good behavior, overcrowding, and a technicality," she said. "He's not fully cleared, he's still got probation, restrictions. But he's out." I swallowed down the panic rising in my throat. "What does he want?" There was a long pause. "He filed paperwork to contest the division of property," Teresa said finally. "He's trying to claw back the bakery." The bakery. My sanctuary. My livelihood. The place I had rebuilt myself piece by piece. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even swear. I just sat there, staring at the pale yellow walls Daniel had helped me paint, and felt the old familiar weight settle back on my chest. But this time I wasn't alone. Daniel showed up within the hour, no questions asked, arms wrapped tight around me like he could physically shield me from the storm. "We'll fight it," he said into my hair. "And we'll win." There was no hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. And for the first time I believed it too. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, filings, affidavits. Teresa worked overtime, digging into every shady deal Alan had ever made, building a wall around me brick by brick. Alan didn't show his face in court this time. He let his new lawyer, some greasy man who looked like he chased ambulances for a living, do the dirty work. The case dragged on. Spring crept into Charleston, azaleas blooming defiantly in every corner. Life went on outside the courtroom, bright and noisy and beautiful. Inside, it was war. But I was ready. The day of the final hearing, I wore a blue dress, the same color as the bakery walls. A quiet rebellion. Alan's lawyer made a show of it. Tried to paint me as manipulative, deceitful, greedy. I sat still, hands folded neatly in my lap, letting the storm crash against me. When it was my turn to speak, I stood. "My husband," I said calmly, "abandoned me in every sense of the word. He betrayed not just me, but our family, our community, and the law he swore to uphold. I rebuilt my life from the ashes he left behind. The bakery isn't just a business. It's my home. It's my survival. It's mine." The judge listened. And then, in words that felt like thunder and sunlight all at once, he ruled. The bakery was mine. Sole ownership. No further claims permitted. I walked out of that courtroom into bright, blinding sunlight, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like the world was too big for me. It felt just right. Daniel was waiting on the courthouse steps, a small bouquet of daisies in his hand. I laughed when I saw them, the sound breaking free like a songbird out of a cage. "You're free," he said simply. I smiled. Really smiled. "We're free." He grinned back, a little shy, a little hopeful. And in that moment, with the city buzzing around us and the sun warm on my skin, I realized something. Surviving wasn't enough anymore. It was time to live. After the courthouse victory, things felt different. Lighter. I didn't realize how much of my life had been spent flinching, waiting for the next blow, until the threats stopped coming. Alan didn't disappear entirely, though. Charleston is a small city in the ways that matter. I heard whispers. He was living in a rundown apartment on the edge of town, bouncing from job to job, trying to reclaim his once glorious reputation. But the world had moved on. The legal community had blacklisted him. Old friends avoided him like a bad smell. Karma, it seemed, was doing its work without any help from me. I poured myself into the bakery, expanding slowly, carefully. I added a little outdoor patio, strung with fairy lights. Business was good. Life was better. Daniel was still there, steady as always. What started as quiet companionship slowly grew into something deeper. He didn't rush me. He didn't ask for more than I could give. He just showed up, every day, until one afternoon, sitting under the fairy lights with 2 coffees between us, I reached out and laced my fingers through his. He squeezed my hand, said nothing, but his whole face lit up. It was enough. Sophie thrived at Georgetown, but in early summer, she came home for a visit and dropped an explosive over breakfast. "I changed my major," she said, digging into her pancakes. I blinked. "To what?" "Law," she said, grinning. "I want to prosecute people like Dad." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. She was serious, though. Determined. Fierce. The girl who had once hidden behind my skirts was gone. In her place stood a woman who would fight for herself, and for others. It was the best kind of revenge. Alan, however, wasn't finished embarrassing himself. A few weeks later, he filed a ridiculous lawsuit claiming emotional distress, against me, against Sophie, against his own mother Sylvia. It was pathetic. We didn't even have to fight it very hard. Sylvia's lawyer squashed it like a bug within days. But it gave me an idea. I had stayed silent long enough. The bakery had a newsletter, modest, mostly recipes, event announcements, little notes from me. Nothing controversial. One morning, after a long conversation with Sylvia, who, to my surprise, encouraged it, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. An open letter. To my customers. To my community. To anyone who had ever wondered what had really happened behind the Whitmore name. I kept it simple. Honest. No embellishments. Just the truth, that I had been married to a man who betrayed not only his wife but his profession, his family, and his principles. That I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of his choices. That my bakery stood as a symbol of resilience, not scandal. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response was overwhelming. Emails poured in. Messages of support. Orders doubled. Local papers picked it up. A popular Charleston blogger wrote a piece called The Sweetest Revenge, How Hannah Whitmore Baked Her Way Back to Life. Alan's name was mud again. This time, I hadn't even had to lift a finger. He tried to sue me for defamation. The suit was laughed out of court. Everything I had said was verifiably true, and truth, as it turns out, is the best defense. By the time autumn rolled around, Alan had left Charleston. Disgraced. Alone. Forgotten. I heard through the grapevine he was living in a small town upstate, working nights at a copy shop, telling anyone who would listen that he had been set up by his vindictive ex-wife and daughter. No one cared. No one believed him. His downfall wasn't bloody. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even particularly dramatic. It was worse. It was quiet. He faded away. Meanwhile, I thrived. The bakery opened a second location that winter. Daniel and I officially started dating, slowly, quietly, joyfully. Sophie came home for the holidays, bright and brilliant and so fiercely alive it made my chest ache with pride. On Christmas Eve, sitting by the fire, Daniel slipped a tiny, simple ring onto my finger. No big speeches. No tears. Just love. Pure and steady. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Life didn't turn out the way I had planned. It turned out better. Stronger. Sweeter. Mine.